Rated M for mature.
Skyrim was all about creating a world that seemed believable and really got across that culture.
Lead artist Matt Carafano.
So Skyrim to us is a little bit more high fantasy, but still very realistic and rugged, so that was very appealing, but it had, just a more interesting bend to it because you saw who these people were, and we could really delve into what are Nords, how do they live, what does their architecture look like, what does the land look like. So that was really appealing for us, do something different. I mean, that's sort of our main character of the game is what is the world, and it helps define so much of the game for us. That walking around and just exploring and finding things, I think, is probably, the most fun you can have in this game. Just getting to do whatever you want. And that, our world lets you do that, and the way it looks, definitely really happy with that.
Welcome to the third developer diary for The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. On the first episode, we discussed the conceptual phase of Skyrim. This time around, we go one step further and meet some of the artists responsible for realizing the in-game look of Skyrim's characters and environments. Early on, the art team knew that creating Skyrim's towering mountains would be one of the most complicated challenges, but for newcomer Dennis Mejiones, the first test was to craft one of the world's lowliest creatures.
Actually, the very first thing I worked on here was a cow. So it was, and not even just any cow, it's like some sort of Scottish cow that's really, really fuzzy. I had never even seen anything like that till I got here, and they're like, here you go. And you'd think to yourself, okay, cow, not a big deal, right? That's my first assignment. Like, oh, it's pretty small task. No, man, it is a furry cow. It is a very furry cow. And fur is incredibly hard to do. So I'm thinking to myself, how the hell am I gonna do all this fur and make it look good, and oh man, it was a scary thing initially, because at first I was like, a cow, and then I got in there and I was like, oh man, this is a nightmare. I actually prefer the big thing of faces than doing all this fur on this cow. It was really tough. I'm a fan of Elder Scrolls and a fan of Fallout and a fan of everything that the studio has done. So initially I was kind of starstruck. You kind of get to the point initially where you're second guessing yourself. You're like, is this good enough? And then, but as you move forward, you get fantastic feedback from the rest of the group, and you start fitting in more, and you're not as shy. And I went from being a guy who used to sit in the corner of the meetings and not say anything to probably talking too much, But I do guess it's always appreciated by everybody, because they're very open to hearing feedback. So it's been an awesome experience in that regard.
Lead character artist Christian Meister.
The biggest challenge was to make the characters themselves look better, because we got a lot of criticism on how the faces looked in Oblivion, and rightfully so. So we basically decided, let's just scrap what we had, start over, do it from the artist perspective.
That was like a pet project for me. Even before I started, I was like, I knew I was going to come in and focus on that. So I did. I came in and, I had some ideas, and initially it was hard to gain ground on that, because Skyrim is so huge that to try to really take on a system which is quite big, the character creation is a big aspect of it, and it's intertwined with a lot of systems, so it was very dangerous to touch.
No one wanted to do it at first, and then actually I sort of was in cahoots with Dennis. And I said, here, let's show them what we can do here, because this just isn't working the way we originally had it. And so, props to Dennis. He's very forthright, and he got the point across, and we were able to continue with what we wanted to do. But yeah, we did have to prove our point.
Todd has always said, Skyrim is this huge world, we want the player to have all this freedom. So I basically took that same thought, and I wanted the players to have the same ability as much as we could within the time we had, to give them that same freedom with character creation, and just to feel like they're creating this badass character on that they could look at and roll around without a helmet and be like, okay, you know what, my character's so cool, I don't want to have a helmet on. I want to see my orc with his scar on his face and blood on his face and all, whatever, that kind of stuff. I really wanted players to get that, and Todd was totally supportive of it. Well, not just me, by the way. It was like a whole team thing. Like we all worked really hard. We had like Charles working on aspects of the hair and the designs of the hairs and the looks for that stuff and beards and all that, which as you know came out pretty awesome. It's nothing like an orc with a giant beard to make you feel like a badass, you know. I think he has this one beard in there that's just like this long pointy beard, and I put it on all my stuff, you know, except the orc. I put that big bushy one on him. It just fits that Leonidas beard. It fits on him, and we would do that. We'd be like I would go to Charles and be like, Charles, man, you should put Leonidas, like the Leonidas beard. Just like, you know what, that's a good idea. I'm gonna put it. Actually, one of my requests for him was the mutton chops. I don't know if you guys have seen the big fuzzy mutton chops. Yep. I was like, man, you got to do these big mutton chops. I want to have like this guy that just brawls, and he has these mutton chops. And when he put them in, I was like, that looks awesome. I have a friend at an old studio, and he grew out these mutton chops one time, and I was like, man, those mutton chops are cool. And I just wanted to see them in Skyrim. I thought it would fit.
So you put them in the game?
Yes, pretty much. I took opportunities here and there to like, if you look at the Imperials closely, they have some resemblance to me. And then, you know, if you actually look at things like the Red Guard women, they have some resemblance to my wife. So I took, and then some of the, I took some features, you know, from other individuals in the studio in character art, and I'm like, you know, I try to kind of put those into the basic features. Like I put a nose, you know, maybe Jonah's nose here, or somebody else's nose there, like a mouth there, just to kind of put a little bit of all the people who worked on the game into the game, you know, try to take reference from that kind of stuff.
So do we have any Argonians in the office?
You know, I'm not going to answer that. For fear of reprisal. But actually the Argonians and the Khajiit were Christiana's work. And yeah, she did a phenomenal job with that. They couldn't have been done any better, I think. They were really well done.
They're my kids, so I just evolved them. It's very easy for me to fit inside their skin and say, what would you look like, you know? But we did make a conscious choice this time around for the Khajiit to be more of a northern-looking cat, you know, like the snow leopard or the lynx, because we thought that would fit the environment a little bit better than a lion type, so that we had in Oblivion. I generally go to, you know, real life examples. What lives in the north. I mean, lizards, that's a bit more of a stretch, but I knew I wanted them to be vicious looking this time and less cute, you know, and try to go a little bit back towards the Morrowind look, but, you know, high-res textures. So, and I love velociraptors because they're just cool. So, there you go.
Meister specializes in the creation of four-legged creatures, taking inspiration from her own farm when designing Skyrim's animals, such as the horse.
It's based on a Clydesdale and a sort of a very round, fluffy Norse horse that they actually have up in Greenland, the Greenland horses, and they're short. We wanted something big, so we kind of mixed the two so that we'd have something very different, because we didn't want a horse from Red Dead, didn't want the horse from Oblivion, you know, and so we wanted something to stand out. Mark Lampert actually came to my farm and did sound stuff with my horses. So every time the horse snorts or whatever, it's one of my horses, I'm like, hey, I'm still in the game. So that was pretty cool. It was nice for him to come out.
In the past, the world artists at Bethesda found that taking a more handcrafted approach to environment building produced a more compelling world. Skyrim was a chance for them to push that theory even further. Lead artist Matt Carafano.
We learned a lot from Fallout 3, actually, because Fallout 3 was all hand-done. The world was completely hand-done. In Oblivion, we used some procedural generation, but then we ended up going through it by hand and cleaning it up. But we found by doing Fallout 3 that making a completely hand-done world just looks a lot better. It's more interesting, it just feels better. So early on, we kind of ramped up the landscape team to a bigger team and worked on that from the beginning to make sure we had the time and the ability to go through the entire world and sculpt it by hand and place every rock, every tree, every ingredient plant is all placed by an artist or a level designer to really make sure the world is well crafted.
My personal artistic leanings are always towards that kind of slightly more brooding, naturalistic, rugged terrain. I just, in general, like that kind of thing.
Lead environmental artist Noah Berry.
I guess the world of Tamriel is is divided up into provinces in that they each have their own very distinct kind of culture, and then also terrain and landscape and topology and environments. And that's one of the exciting things about jumping into a new Elder Scrolls project is, all right, this is going to be this completely fresh switch from whichever title came previously, where we get to tackle a whole new ecology. So for Skyrim, that was one of the easier things, I think, to define. We all had a pretty good picture in mind of, again, kind of that craggy, epic, windswept northern feel. I think the next step from that was, well, we took a similar approach with Oblivion, where we sort of sketched out, visually speaking, what the general lay of the land was going to look like and what kind of environments they were going to be. And I think with that game being a much more of a next-gen shift for us, we spent a lot more time focusing on possibly more technical details than really putting more oomph into some of the landscape world design. So we wanted to improve on that for Skyrim, and we tried to address that by creating very visually distinct sub-regional zones for the province of Skyrim that you play in. A lot of those differences, I think, come from elements such as completely distinct texture palettes, different vegetation types. We spent a lot more time building and placing effects art, kind of custom, unique built assets per regions, thinking about what specific gameplay and or just landscape specific art that we could place in each of these sub-regions to give them a distinct feel. I think elements like the giant rock arch that supports Solitude up in the northwest versus like the kind of the foggy, mist-shrouded, craggy valley of the Reach, drifting off into the south. We've got this giant, barren, Icelandic tundra that is kind of the heart of the Skyrim province, and then it all kind of is rimmed by these gigantic, craggy mountains that sort of, in a way, sort of define and then also end up nicely bordering the region. So that's something that I think worked out nicely, in that a lot of the border for the playable area is actually, natural landscape features.
The mountains were something we wanted to do definitely from the beginning. We wanted to get away from what Oblivion was, which was rolling hills everywhere, and that you could pretty much walk in any direction from wherever you are. You could go anywhere and not really be blocked by anything. And the mountains gave us a chance to not only make these really dramatic views in the game, because you could get awesome skylines, really cool areas where you could kind of come up out of the forest and get these great views, but it also let us kind of block the player and define the space. It's just a lot more interesting when you can break up the height map with something that's, a much more dramatic.
I think specifically we really liked the look for Skyrim. We really liked the look of the French Alps. And Mont Blanc, I think, is one of the key spots. I remember finding really good photos of this really nicely cut, cragged rock that we liked the qualities of and the color as well.
One thing that was actually pretty difficult for us was actually getting the mountains to work. They were a tough challenge, not only visually, like how they're going to look, but how many we could put into the world. Did it block too much gameplay and paths for the player? And it's a tricky challenge because our mountains aren't just backdrops. You can climb up all of them. So we had to make something that looked good at a distance, but held up as you ran all the way up to it and then climbed up to it. Figuring out all the new system for LOD for that was definitely a big challenge. And that took, like 2 years of the project, getting mountains working and a good, pipeline for that.
We have this base height map terrain system. That's great for moderately hilly, more typical East Coast landscape, but for really vertical stretch stuff, it was kind of problematic. So we spent a lot of time, I spent a ton of time, I should say, kind of researching what visuals we wanted to get out of the pieces that we were going to try and build. Ultimately, we constructed these giant mountain pieces and sort of used them as a kit, kind of as we do with, I guess, any of the other architecture elements in the game. These are, of course, much more organic, a little less Lego-like. You know, they don't quite snap together. These things also needed to perform well in the game, and that was definitely a new hurdle for us to tackle and try and jump across. And we tried a couple of different techniques at first. I think I was trying to like make a high-res model of the entire world at one point, which was just, you know, in our typical Bethesda fashion, bit off way more than we could chew, at least in terms of performance. The game was not gonna take well to that, because also it was a big trade-off with things like texture resolution or just visual fidelity. It just kind of, you know, it had the nice silhouettes and profiles, but texture-wise, it just didn't hold up. So we ended up sort of taking a chunk out of that technique and sort of honing that down to smaller shapes to work with. And we spent some time like playing with how big should these things be, and then how are we going to get them to work when they're right in your face in first person, and then that exact same object needs to persist and look good, you know, miles out in the distance in the horizon. So that was definitely another big hurdle to tackle.
Almost becomes like fractal geometry or something, where it's like...
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely. And we sort of looked at you know, it's funny that you mentioned that too. We sort of tapped into that idea for our local rock set, which is kind of a smaller, even more high detail subset of the mountain pieces too. We spent a lot of time thinking about how like they should also mimic fractally the qualities of these giant pieces that, you know, I guess in a real world scenario they're actually parts of, but, you know, hitting the threshold of game detail at that point.
You know, it's actually really exciting for us because, you know, we've been working on this game for so long. We've finally gotten to, you know, kind of show what the game is, but people haven't really played it yet.
You always worry at the very end, did we do everything that we could? And this time, more than any time, I feel like we've accomplished something great. I mean, the game is so big. I've been playing it now for forever, right? And I still don't want to leave. I just want to keep playing it, you know? And that's something if, you know, you're a dev on a game, right? And you don't want to stop playing it.
I am always flabbergasted about how we're able to pull these off somehow. Because we start these projects and we're so jazzed and so pumped about all of these crazy ideas that we have bouncing off the walls. And it becomes this whittling process of trying to cram all of this, like, craziness into, you know, something we can actually make and fine-tune and polish, and then also have it somehow top and be better than whatever we've done prior. But, you know, we come through and eventually are able to kind of lift our heads up from the desk and go, oh my God, we did it again. We make crazy, awesome, big games. We are nuts. I don't know, I think hopefully the fans know that, and hopefully they'll have fun out there.